This film is the story of a timid and solitary young man who became a planetary hero. How did he succeed in his exploit? And afterwards, how was his life transformed by fame and by the tragedy of his son's murder? By the crowd's adoration and then their rejection. The undesirable people he frequented, his redemption, and his secret life. This is the story of Lindbergh, in color. Nearly a century ago, flying alone over the middle of the Atlantic, a young American pilot attempts the first nonstop flight from New York to Paris. A crazy undertaking at the time. In the United States, at the end of the First World War, all sorts of desperate people are willing to risk their lives for a few dollars. Flying over farms and fields, barnstormers, the first flying circus pilots, defy danger to awe their rural audience and convince customers to pay a few dollars for a baptismal flight. Among these flying crazies, Charles Lindbergh, 20 years old, nicknamed Slim, 6'5" and weighing only 148 pounds, sometimes walks between the wings. Even riskier, he makes a few dollars by testing new parachutes. On his first jump, his parachute opens, but only at the last moment. Baptized Lucky Lindy, he makes enough money to buy a World War I surplus airplane for only $500. And he becomes a daredevil. He says, "It's where immortality is touched through danger, where life meets death on equal plane, where man is more than a man, an existence both supreme and valueless at the same time." Who else but a pioneer of the West could say such a thing? Lindbergh was born February 4th, 1902 in Detroit, Michigan. His mother was a chemistry teacher. She treated him as if he were one of her students. She was distant and rigid, and thus raised a very introverted boy. He grew up along the banks of the Mississippi in a falsely idyllic atmosphere, as his parents no longer got along. A solitary child, his only friend is his dog, Spot. His father was a very severe man and didn't show him affection either. A conservative politician, he was elected by an illiterate rural constituency. At an age when he should have been out playing with other children, his father was dragging him to the House of Representatives in Washington. But it's here, in Washington, that he saw the Wright brothers take off in the first plane ever to fly. In 1918, his father left his wife, leaving his 16-year-old son to run the farm. Charles sold the farm materials and livestock to pay for a motorcycle and classes at the university. He wanted to become an engineer, but he got bored at school. Lindbergh was expelled from the university and persuaded his parents to pay for aviation lessons. April 8th, 1922, Lindbergh flew for the first time. An unforgettable sensation, like escaping the terrestrial world, which was often frightening to him. That day was truly his second birth. He said, "It was a love of the air and sky and flying, the lure of adventure, the appreciation of beauty. It lay beyond the descriptive words of men." This is how Lindbergh went on to become a barnstormer, an aerial acrobat. He learns to get out of the most perilous situations. He wants to progress and fly even more powerful machines. He signs up to become an Army fighter pilot. He's passionate about formation flying and fighter pilot acrobatics. But he can't sign on for longer because the Army's cutting back on troops. So in 1925, Lieutenant Lindbergh is assigned with some regret to the Army Reserves with the rank of captain. He enters the post office's aerial delivery service. They're in need of experienced, precise, disciplined pilots. For 1 year, flying day and night, Lindbergh transports thousands of letters. He accumulates hundreds of hours of flying time and develops great endurance. This type of training gives him time to dream. He's talented, and he gains experience. Planes are improving. They can now fly longer distances. Why not attempt a new distance record? Why not try a shot at the Ortegue Prize? Raymond Ortegue, a Frenchman who became rich in the US, created a prize of $25,000, $270,000 today, for the first aviator to fly nonstop from New York to Paris. He wanted to prolong the wartime alliance, the spirit of Lafayette, the friendship between France and the US. "24-year-old Charles Augustus Lindbergh decides to throw himself into the race. Lindbergh's taught many important St. Louis businessmen to fly. He contacts them. But more importantly, he becomes a member of the Freemasons. Here's a rare photo. Their ceremonies are highly secret. It shows Lindbergh in a Masonic lodge. The Freemasons of St. Louis make up a powerful business network, and these influential men become Lindbergh's sponsors. Bankers like Harold Bigsby, investment experts like Harry Knight, or the owner of the local daily paper, Lansing Ray. Lindbergh raises $13,000, which he promises to pay back, and adds his own savings of $2,000. He takes the train to California, where he's finally found a constructor for his airplane. The Ryan Flying Company of San Diego proposes to build his plane within the budget and promises to complete the work in 2 months in their factory, a former canning plant that still smells of fish. Lindbergh and the engineer Donald Hall begin working on the plane's designs. Lindbergh insists on placing an enormous gas tank in front of him. A retractable periscope is created, allowing him a limited frontal view. Everything is calculated to maximize fuel storage capacity. There won't be a co-pilot or a navigator. The structure is a sort of customized flying box built around Lindbergh. Early March, the steel fuselage is ready. It'll be covered with canvas, as will the wing's wooden frames. Lindbergh is a perfectionist and meticulously verifies each detail. At first, the workers are blasé and skeptical about his project, but he wins them over with his perseverance and professionalism. They work overtime for Lindbergh, 10 hours a day, and at night their wives sew together the canvas. This was the technique at the time. Only the nose cone is covered in metal. The engine, a 9-cylinder Wright J5C Whirlwind with 223 horsepower, is mounted. It's a marvel, far ahead of its time. Lindbergh breaks it down and rebuilds it so many times that a mechanic finally asks, "Why are you so obsessive?" Lindbergh answers, "Because I can't swim." Early April 1927. The plane receives its official call number, NX-211, N for all American planes, X for experimental, Ryan type NYP, New York, Paris. Lindbergh has the mechanics install a series of instruments which are state-of-the-art for the time and which will enable him to fly in zero visibility, as well as a series of valves to control the fuel stored in his 5 tanks. Facing the controls, he installs the most uncomfortable wicker garden chair he can find, meant to keep him from falling asleep. April 27, 1927, Lindbergh's plane finally leaves the workshop. Lindbergh demands every precaution be taken for this delicate maneuver preceding the final assembly. Lindbergh's in the car. He says, "What finesse, what elegance, with its silver coat." The plane gets its large wings, 27 feet 8 inches across, a new record. The plane is named Spirit of St. Louis. Lindbergh's kept his bet, accompanied by his engineer and the rest of the Ryan team. 60 days after having begun construction, the moments finally arrived. All of the calculations and planning have become reality. The miracle of aviation is reproduced, as it is with every takeoff. It flies, and quite well. He arrives in New York on May 12th. The landing is difficult, with no forward visibility. Lindbergh's surprised to discover that his arrival is very much awaited. The public and the press have rushed here to discover the face of their new hero. The crowd and all the commotion make him at ease. He's seen making an upset gesture. Then he's rapidly pulled away by his motor's manufacturer. Worried by what she reads in the press, his mother rushes to New York, which angers Lindbergh. They insist that mother and son kiss, but he categorically refuses. It's something they've never done. A reporter insists, "But Mrs. Lindbergh, this may be the last time you see your son." Lindbergh hates the press. "Do you have a girlfriend?" "No," he answers, becoming more awkward. The press nickname him the Lone Eagle. Yet women have a crush on him, with his movie actor looks and the dimple on his chin. At dawn, Lindbergh takes his plane out of its hangar. He hasn't slept. He's been waiting for the weather to change. They say it might clear up over the Atlantic, and he leaps at the opportunity. He fills up his tanks with oil and gas, verifying it's well filtered. His 5 gas tanks are filled to the maximum, and to compensate for all this weight, he eliminates superfluous equipment, like the battery, for his instrument light. Instead, he'll use a simple flashlight. He refuses to take a radio or a parachute. They're too heavy. Only a small inflatable life raft bought on sale. And a thick flight suit, which he designed himself for protection from the cold at high altitudes. He takes only 5 sandwiches and a flask of water. "Is that enough?" asks a reporter. With his usual dry humor, he answers, "Enough to get to Paris. If I don't make it, I won't need them." The fateful moments arrived. He can't let down those who've helped him, but he knows the wind is blowing in the bad direction. He's nervous as his plane rolls over the muddy ground covered with potholes from the constant rain. He did everything to lighten the plane, but it still weighs 2.5 tons, more than double its weight, empty. It's incredible. The fuselage shakes under the effort. The motor runs perfectly, but it lacks 30 more RPM, he says. He doesn't have full power. No plane's ever taken off with such a large load of fuel. The end of the runway is 300 meters away, and he can't stop now. The telegraph lines are approaching dangerously fast. And he flies over them. It's Friday, May 20th, 1927, at exactly 7:52 a.m. Airborne newsreel cameras follow him over Long Island. He flies further away. No camera filmed his flight beyond this point. I find myself in a blanket of fog, Lindbergh says. A thick curtain that's moving with me. What's beyond the curtain? Using the telescope, I look in front of me. I come out of the fog. The horizon brightens. The wings shake in the turbulence. Will they break? It's the first time that Lindbergh's ever adventured over water. A long flight over the ocean before reaching Nova Scotia. It's my first test of navigation over the ocean, Lindbergh says. As I didn't sleep last night, time seems to be passing slowly. My cruising speed isn't going over 100 miles per hour. The small bubble in the center indicates that the plane is stable. But the altimeter reading is dangerous. It's nearing zero. I'm too low. I just miss hitting a sailboat's mast. I'm so heavy that I'm having a lot of trouble climbing. I have to climb, but gradually, to be careful of the motor. He's nervous about the plane's light frame and canvas. They were never meant to stand up to such heavy turbulence. Miraculously, the storm dies down. At nightfall, Lindbergh reaches Nova Scotia. And then, finally, he heads out over the Atlantic. He disappears into the night. At the 18th hour of the flight, he's caught in a magnetic storm. His compass is completely disoriented. The spirit of St. Louis is in the clouds, flying in circles without a landmark, without a hope. It's one of the flight's worst moments. With his flashlight in his mouth, he tries getting back on course with his instruments. But finally, it's a clearing in the clouds which allows him to navigate by the stars. He can once again set course for Europe. He relaxes, a fatal error. He doesn't notice he's descending towards the ocean. He hasn't slept for over 40 hours, and he can't take it any longer. It's torture, he says, dazed by the motor's loud noise. The human body was never meant to endure such torture. My back's stiff, my eyes are burning, and what I want most in the world is to lay down and sleep. Why is the need to sleep stronger and more forceful over the sea than over land? Is it because there's nothing to look at, nothing but waves? He loses consciousness for a few moments. He nearly crashes. He pulls up just above the waves. At the 27th hour, he thinks he sees a spot on the ocean. He leans over and sees a fishing boat. He yells, "Where's Ireland?" as if the fisherman could hear him over the motor's roar. Even without an answer, he believes his direction is correct, and it is. Ireland soon appears. Lindbergh's now become the first man ever to link North America to Europe on a solo voyage. If Lindbergh stopped here, he'd already be famous. But he's competing for the Orteig Prize. He must go all the way to Paris. He follows Cornwall's rough and rocky coast and crosses the English Channel like in a dream. His fatigue's disappeared. He's alert now, flying high on optimism as he passes over Deauville at the end of his second day. He plays at castle hopping, and he finally allows himself to eat his first sandwich. He's about to throw his paper bag and crumbs out the window, but changes his mind. These fields are so clean and pretty, he thinks. I wouldn't want that to be my first contact with the French soil. The news spreads. Lindbergh's been spotted. It's 10:20 p.m. on this Saturday, May 21st, 1927. After 33 hours and 30 minutes of flying time, Lindbergh arrives in Paris. The cameramen aren't allowed to approach the plane, much less Lindbergh, who's swiftly taken to the American ambassador's residence. The next morning, Sunday's first curiosity seekers come to see Lindbergh. They applaud outside the residence as he appears in a suit lent by the ambassador's valet. He's finally slept. His first gesture is to shout his joy, using the only 3 words he knows in French: "Vive la France." He's then informed that a telephone connection's been established with his mother in the US. He says, "I've had a good trip." She responds, "Get some rest." Myron Herrick, the American ambassador, tells the crowd, "This young man coming from the West, he brings America's soul to you. America's heart beats for France. When he returns home, he can say that France truly loves the people of the United States." Paris is home to the largest crowds ever since the signing of the armistice on November 11, 1918. The Americans are asking for Lindbergh to come home. He goes to Bourget to prepare his departure. He would have liked to see more of Europe, but he only has time for short trips to Brussels and London. Lindbergh is impressed by his invitation from a true monarch, the Belgian king. He admires Brussels' beauty. The mayor proclaims, "Your victory is that of all humanity. You've done more than anyone to bring mankind together." The next day, wearing a leather jacket offered by French aviators, he takes off for London. He's welcomed by a crowd of 1 million people massed at the Croydon airfield. He's unaware that all around the globe, in cities like Berlin and Tokyo, huge crowds are joyously celebrating his victory. To save himself from the crowd, he's obliged to climb up the control tower. He yells, "This is even worse than at Bourget. I mean to say, it's even better." He's beginning to understand the true signification of his exploit, which has made him a prisoner to fame. In London, he visits the home of King George V. A young woman hurries toward him. Lindbergh's autograph is already worth a small fortune. George V dares to ask the simple question, during the flight, how did you satisfy the needs of nature? Lindbergh responds, I used a thermos that I threw out into the ocean. Yet this doesn't seem to be the true case. His famous flight suit had to be thrown out. It was too soiled to be reused. And still wearing his new leather jacket, he boards the ocean liner Memphis, which will take him home to the U.S. He's of course accompanied by his precious Spirit of St. Louis, dismantled and stored in crates. On board, the radio plays the first of the more than 200 songs that will be written about Lindbergh and his historic feat.
Lindbergh, oh what a flying fool was he. Lindbergh, his name will live in history. Over the ocean he flew all alone, gambling with fate and with dangers unknown. Others may take that trip across the sea upon some future day. But take your hats off to lucky Lindbergh, the eagle of the USA.
21 cannon shots to welcome Lindy home. The honor of welcoming Lindbergh is reserved, of course, for his mother. Evangeline Land Lindbergh says, I'm very impressed by his simplicity, his dignity, the depth of my son's soul. The President of the United States, Calvin Coolidge, makes him a colonel, a rank rarely achieved at his young age. Three days later in New York, the United States witnesses the greatest ticker tape parade in its history. Lindbergh's only now becoming fully conscious of how his life's been completely transformed. He'll never again be able to walk alone in the street or enter a store without causing a riot. His loved ones will never be completely safe from strangers. As of now, people try tearing off pieces of his clothing for souvenirs. He's followed everywhere like the celebrities of the time. Hollywood's movie producers send him telegrams. Paramount and Universal offer him contracts for $700,000, but he refuses. Acting is not his career. But money, nonetheless, begins pouring in. To start, the Frenchman Raymond Ortegue, who is at the origin of this entire adventure, awards him his prize money, the famous check for $25,000. Quite a considerable sum at the time. And that's just the beginning. The billionaire Henry Guggenheim, one of aviation's great sponsors, offers $50,000 to send the Spirit of St. Louis on tour to the 48 states of the Union. In a 4-month period, Lindbergh succeeds in greatly promoting air transportation. The number of airfields is about to double. Many of them will carry the hero's name. Countless children, towns, and parks will also be named after him. An Oklahoma Indian tribe names him Shitokaka, the greatest of the White Eagles. He continues his tour with the Spirit of St. Louis, direction Latin America. In Mexico, at the end of December 1927, he's given a very particular mission. His great popularity is needed to help Ambassador Dwight Moreau to improve Mexican-American relations. The signs of a warming in relations come rapidly, demonstrated by this exceptional Welcome Lindbergh written in sand in Mexico's Great Arena. After receiving the poor bull's ears and tail, Lindbergh spends Christmas in a real family setting with the ambassador's family. With all the demands of his public life, He rarely has occasions for meeting young women. He's interested in the ambassador's second daughter, Anne Moreau, 21 years old. She's a literary girl, a writer, whose poems are sensitive and sensual. She's timid, and not so much in love as she is subjugated by Lindbergh, this man who has a very particular conception of things. Later, he'd write, "A girl should come from a healthy family. My experience in breeding animals on our farm had taught me the importance of good heredity. The physical qualities I wanted in a woman were good health, good sight, and hearing. But most importantly, I wanted to marry a girl who liked flying." For two such timid people, the motor's rumble will help them get around having to engage in love talk. She's more seduced by the hero than in love with him and agrees to marry him on May 27, 1929. And one need only see them together, how he directs this frightened bird with his hand and with his eyes. The press follows them everywhere and calls them the couple of the skies. He teaches her piloting and aerial navigation. He promises her beautiful voyages and great adventures. Yet Lindbergh doesn't seem truly happy, and it shows in this rare film, shot at a small Californian airfield. Anne Moreau prepares to become the first woman in the United States to earn a glider's pilot license. On this particular afternoon, her friends try warming up the atmosphere around Anne, whose smile, as usual, shows some sadness. Charles is seated off to the side with a very serious demeanor. Is it because the cameras have once again intruded into his private life, or because he's just learned that Anne is pregnant? It's good news in and of itself, but it might create obstacles for his projects of upcoming voyages. He craves more exploits, the unknown. He needs to depart again. He hires Lockheed to construct an ultra-modern airplane, the Sirius. And he embarks the pregnant Anne Moreau aboard, where she's confined within this tight cockpit, devoid of comfort. They'll break the North American cross-continental speed record by 3 hours. At their arrival, everyone except Lindbergh can see that she's endured a torture within this steel box. Her pained smile shows her fatigue. One year after their marriage, June 22, 1930, Charles Lindbergh Jr. is born. America celebrates his birth as if the boy were a royal descendant. Lindbergh refuses to show his son to the story-hungry press, but even on his 420-acre estate near New York, he can't keep totally hidden from the camera's telephoto lenses. In the social context of America's Great Depression, a vengeful press begins attacking Lindbergh for being paid to do nothing. He has the title of technical director for the first trans-American air route, which has been named the Lindbergh Line. For the airline's advertising films, he flies alongside the first commercial flights. He's more and more present in the media, and he's receiving an increasing number of threats against his child. March 1st, 1932. Anne Moreau Lindbergh, who is once again pregnant, says goodnight to her boy at 8 o'clock. he quietly falls asleep. His nanny is sleeping in the adjoining room. When Anne Moreau returns to her boy's room at about 10 p.m., his crib is empty. A ladder outside is the sign of a kidnapping. A badly scribbled ransom note demands $50,000. The kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby becomes the human interest headline of the century. Daily papers see their sales increase. Lindbergh is definitely good for business. An employee of the house is suspected. She commits suicide rather than having to confess her affair with the head butler. Lindbergh seems oddly calm, but he tries everything in his power. This Puritan even goes so far as to solicit the help of gangsters. Al Capone offers a $10,000 reward for any helpful information. Lindbergh authorizes that these private home movies be shown to help people identify the baby with his famous dimpled chin. To save his boy, on April 2nd, 1932, Lindbergh has someone hand over the ransom money in this suburban New York cemetery while closely surveying the operation. But the Lindberghs receive no news. The search is intensified. One month later, the poor baby's dead body is found, partially eaten by wild animals. It's established that he died during the kidnapping. The kidnapper dropped him from up on the ladder. Anne Moreau cries constantly. Lindbergh doesn't want their son buried. He wants to avoid the tomb becoming a tourist attraction. So he takes off for the Atlantic, at practically the same spot where 5 years earlier he began his voyage to glory. He throws his son's ashes into the ocean, and with them, a small part of himself. The hero will never be the same. A man's been arrested and accused of his son's kidnapping. His trial will mark a decisive test in Lindbergh's life. The papers call it the trial of the century. For a year, Lindbergh attends every day of the trial. The accused is named Bruno Hauptmann, a German immigrant and a carpenter. The police find the ransom money at his home, clumsily hidden in oil containers. But did he work alone? And is he even guilty? He consistently denies it, throughout the prosecutor's relentless questioning.
Time and time again, didn't you? I did not. You did not? No.
Yes, keep up your spirits, everything.
Hauptmann's attorney advises that he keep his courage. The jury finds him guilty and he's put to death in the electric chair, even though today, doubts still remain over his guilt. The trial's finished, the guilty party's punished, accomplices ignored. The reporter's harassment, the seller of scale models of the famous wooden ladder, and even fake hair from his boy, all of this destroys Lindbergh, who says, "The American people are a primitive people. They're morally inferior, which is proved by their morbid curiosity for this case." An irresponsible press that sets no limit for itself is one of democracy's great dangers. He concludes, democracy itself can be dangerous. The Lindberghs flee the U.S., and to remain anonymous, they sail on this small ship. But on their arrival in England, the cameramen are still there, and it's impossible to hide their second son, John. anxiety returns. Yet, it gradually calms down as they reach their new home in Kent. Charles rediscovers a peaceful family setting. It's at this time that Lindbergh will become seduced by Nazi Germany. Field Marshal Goering, second in power to Hitler and commander of the German Air Force, is encouraged by the American government to invite the Lindberghs for a visit. It's hoped that Lindbergh can ascertain Germany's military strength. Willy Messerschmitt, the famous aircraft constructor, warmly receives them and invites Charles to fly his latest plane. Accompanied by a U.S. military attaché, he's visibly impressed during his visit to the Messerschmitt factories. But what he sees isn't exactly the real situation. Hitler's Germany has a modern air force, but it's not yet powerful enough. In his report, Lindbergh presents an illusion which is costly for Western democracies, who are persuaded that Hitler's become invincible. Lindbergh becomes enthralled by the Nazi regime. He writes, "There reigns a spirit that I've not seen in any other country. Everything is order and efficiency, in contrast to the disorder that reigns in France." Lindbergh also states, "We should not be mistaken about our enemy. The real enemy is the Soviet Union." He considers Hitler to be less a threat than Stalin. It's understandable why Field Marshal Goering presented him with the Service Cross of the German Eagle. Lindbergh takes on a new mission of defending the superiority of the white race. On his family's return to the U.S., he preaches his philosophy. America is divided over his message. For some, he's still a hero. For others, he's Hitler's messenger. President Roosevelt receives him. Officially, it's to thank him for his report on Germany's air power, but it's also to try to win him over. It doesn't work. Nazi Germany launches its conquest of Europe. European democracies ask for help from the U.S. and from President Roosevelt.
People of Europe who are defending themselves do not ask us to do their fighting. They ask us for the implements of war, the planes, the tanks, the guns.
Summer 1940, France is defeated. Lindbergh uses his notoriety to maintain the public opinion's opposition to Roosevelt, who wants to enter into the war. Lindbergh becomes the leader of a vast isolationist movement, America First. Lindbergh may even have been able to win election for President of the United States, at great cost to Europe.
We in this country have a right to think of the welfare of America first. No one can make us fight abroad unless we ourselves are willing to do so.
In 1941, the Germans are advancing victoriously in Russia. During a famous radio address broadcast September 11, 1941, Lindbergh lays blame on what he calls war agitators working within the United States, trying to force the country into the war. They're the British, the Roosevelt administration, and the Jews. Lindbergh predicts they will be among the first to feel the war's consequences. Anne Moreau, who proofreads his speeches, thinks as he does. Yet, she fears a scandal, and with good reason, because it arrives quickly. The press denounces his anti-Semitism and labels him America's most dangerous man. 3 months later, Pearl Harbor is bombed. Japan, a German ally, attacks the United States. It's over for America First. The group's dissolved. The countries united to enter into the war, and Lindbergh's now out of the picture. Roosevelt refuses to allow him a post in the army. He's muzzled and condemned to obscure technical jobs, such as testing these altitude pressure chambers. In 1944, Lindbergh manages to get the post of civilian consultant in the Pacific. His experience allows him to conduct advanced pilot training. Flying clandestine combat missions against the Japanese, he once again experiences the thrill and craziness of his youthful piloting days. He does his part in the war against the Yellow Asiatics, not against the Germans, but he's fighting for his country. He takes risks. He flies bombing missions in the islands, shoots down Japanese planes. He recovers his reputation. He's reinstated in the Army with the rank of Brigadier General. He's even considered for the office of Secretary of the Air Force, but he prefers to stay a simple aeronautic advisor to President Eisenhower. He makes frequent trips to Europe, like this mission during NATO's very first maneuvers. In 1953, Lindbergh publishes his memoirs, The Spirit of St. Louis. It becomes a bestseller, wins the Pulitzer Prize, and is made into a movie directed by Billy Wilder and starring James Stewart. Lindbergh's missions to Europe are also practical for his personal life. They justify long stays away from home. Anne Moreau suffers from these trips. Her writing success doesn't make up for her husband's long absences. She'll never learn that Lindbergh has founded 3 other secret families in Europe. 40 years later, and after Anne Moreau's death, Lindbergh's double or triple life is finally revealed. He fathered 2 children with his secretary, 3 others with one of her friends, and 2 more with this friend's sister, making a total of 13 children, including those he fathered with Anne Moreau. All very handsome and all very bright. To travel from one family to another, Lindbergh drives thousands of miles through Germany and Switzerland in his modest Volkswagen Beetle. In the tiny car, like in the cockpit of a laughable Spirit of St. Louis replica, gripping his steering wheel, he wonders about his life and times. He writes, "Why not start at zero and remake my life, setting course by whatever seems worthwhile, discarding the rest?" As a college youth, I thought civilization could never be destroyed again, that it was too powerful, too universal. But after seeing the destruction of high explosive bombs and flying over the atomic bombed city of Hiroshima, I realized how vulnerable my profession, aviation, has made all people. I truly wonder if aviation has been a benefit to humanity. So Lindbergh seeks escape. He becomes a defender of ecology and the planet's preservation. These rare images, possibly the last of him, show Lindbergh with an NGO in the Philippine Islands working to save endangered tribes. he still held to a last hope. He said this hope was in the sky, in what man has never touched. August 26, 1974. Charles Lindbergh died of cancer at 72 years of age in Hawaii. He departed for the Freemasons' eternal hereafter, seeking the universe's great architect, who will undoubtedly show understanding for the lone eagle.
Lindbergh, oh what a flying fool was he. Lindbergh, his name will live in history. Over the ocean he flew all alone, gambling with fate and with dangers unknown. Others may take that trip across the sea upon some future day. But take your hats off to lucky Lindbergh.